Donald Trump has been president for almost 800 days. He's been president for almost 800 days. 675 of those included special counsel Mueller's investigation. As Molly pointed out, obviously there were stories and allegations prior to that about this Russian investigation. So no matter how you look at it, this is a consequential moment for this presidency, for this nation. No matter what happens from this report, and it's important to point out, we don't have the details inside. We do know from senior Department of Justice officials that the special counsel is not recommending any indictments tied to this report. Joining us again, Dana Perino, Juan Williams, and Chris Wallace. Chris.
Well, I think that it's we don't want to rush to judgment, and I think that because this report has come out since no one has seen it, to say that somehow this clears the president seems like the height of rushing to judgment. People talk about the appointment of the special counsel. The fact is, the reason the special counsel was appointed was because of the fact that the president fired James Comey in the middle of his investigation. If Comey had been allowed to finish his investigation, there probably wouldn't have been a special counsel. I'm also a little surprised at this talk about process crimes. Process crimes are not parking tickets. Process crimes are lying to federal prosecutors. They're lying to the FBI. This is the very basis under which justice is administered, and to the degree that you commit perjury, that is a very serious crime, and oftentimes you're committing perjury to hide important facts that investigators want to know. I think we should also point out that this special prosecutor, or the special counsel, resulted in the indictment and guilty pleas and serious convictions of Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor to the president, Paul Manafort, the former campaign chairman for the president for several months, and Michael Cohen, the president's personal lawyer and fixer. When you look at this in a kind of a big picture way, there's no question the president has been under a cloud for his entire presidency on the question of this investigation, suspicions, and then a formal investigation as to whether or not he colluded with the Russians and whether he obstructed justice. So the fact that that investigation is over is a big milestone, even if we don't know what the final conclusion of the special counsel was. We'll have to wait and see. And I do think that if, and repeat if, it should be that the president is cleared of those basic fundamental charges of the special counsel, whether it was 1, collusion, or 2, obstruction of justice, that is a major victory for the president. And yes, Congress, and there are 6 committees that will continue to investigate. But if he is basically cleared of those charges, then it seems to me that there's going to be relatively little patience on the part of the public for continuing investigations, and they'll be seen as simply an effort by Democrats to try to find ways to cut up the president after the election. But in the basic charge, the cloud that he has been under, if the evidence shows that, it'll be a tremendous victory for the president, and he'll be largely in the clear in terms of these investigations.
Well, I think, and to you, Dana, we're making clear that this is a consequential moment, a big moment, no matter what is in the report, and the caveats are all over the place when we talk about this, but the politics are front and center.
Well, they are, and of course, I think that one thing that could be very interesting is, because this has been so secretive in many ways, you think about Robert Mueller, there have been no leaks, no grandstanding. He's run a very tight ship, and that's a good example for how to keep integrity of an investigation. And I think that he ends this with his reputation that was already stellar. He leaves with that completely intact, and now he can go back to doing it, whatever he was trying to do before he was called back into service to do this report. In addition, though, Brett, think about all of the people that have had to hire lawyers, that have had to be interviewed by the special counsel. It is very stressful. It is something that you have to keep very quiet. It's like between you and your attorney and your family, and that's it. But we might start to hear a little bit more about that. I don't know what we'll learn. We could learn the extent of it, but that is, of course, we know there are some people in the White House that have had to submit to those interviews. And so we might hear a little bit about how they were treated. And however, then that said, when you ask about the politics, I think there will be, as Chris said, very little patience if Congress decides that they want to just go ahead and just go back over this entire report. You just said it was a 2-year report, $12 million or $25 million total. The American people, yes, they want to know what was in it, but are they going to want to watch leading Democrats on Capitol Hill rehash this for 2 years? And the Democrats ought to be thinking about, do they want to show that they can govern? Do they want to start having hearings on issues that matter? Because, 2020, it's really not that far away.
One thing to point out before I get to you, Juan, and that is not one person is being indicted for colluding with Russia or conspiracy with Russia to affect the election or his campaign. And that's a fact from officials at the Justice Department, report or no report, as we learn whatever is in it. Some experts who know this very well say this. There could be a secret grand jury, information known as 6E, in the report that's not supposed to be released publicly, since witnesses did not have lawyers present in those grand jury proceedings, and it's not technically a court proceeding. There could be secret intelligence information in the report, the release of which might damage national security in some way, shape, or form. There could be unproven and provocative statements or claims in the report, but tested by a court process that are over the top. The Attorney General is not just a clerk in this process. He has significant constitutional and statutory role. Special Counsel Mueller reports to him, and Attorney General Barr is to exercise his judgment in this case. Just thought I'd add that to the conversation.
I think that's an important point. You got to keep in mind here as we hit this moment in terms of, the nearly 2-year-long process, that what we've learned from Robert Mueller on the record, if you will, what is in public at this moment is that he has charged 34 people with crimes, Brett. 6 of 6 people who were intimate with President Trump, Mike Flynn, for example, Paul Manafort. Apparently Manafort was providing polling information. Like, all of this is known because of the indictments that were filed by Robert Mueller. In addition, you have 24 people of the 34 in total that have been charged with crime who are Russians, who in fact are Russians that he has charged with interfering in the 2016 election. We will never see those people because they can't be extradited from Russia to come and face a trial here in the United States. So that, in a sense, gives you the universe that is on the record of what we know from Mueller's work. But when it comes to the politics of it, you can imagine that the Democrats are already chomping at the bit to say, why didn't Mueller go farther, specifically in regard to Trump's relationship with some of the Russian oligarchs and loans and the like. Deutsche Bank specifically has come to great attention in recent days, loans made, alleged lies told in terms of Trump's wealth. Much of this laid out by, again, another Trump intimate, Michael Cohen, when he was brought before Congress and testified and said that there were people in the Trump organization who knew about these things. That is the kind of line of breadcrumbs that leads to so much of the activity that's going to take place in the Southern District Prosecutor's Office here in New York, but also give ammunition to Democrats who are already, it seems to me, readying for the 2020 campaign and saying, we want to know more, and we're willing to put more out there on the record to keep this flame going as we begin a political process, the 2020 election.
Chris, just to mark this moment, Michael Beschloss, historian, tweets out, and so March 22nd, 2019 turns out to be the date that will go into the history books. Obviously, just noting that the report is in. To Juan's point, though, understanding that we don't know all that's in the report, but if the president is largely cleared of anything in this report, and it comes out that he is using it to say, see, I told you so, is there a decision for Democrats to make on the investigations that they have launched already as we head into this next election that, as Governor Rendell told us on election night in midterms, you have to decide whether to legislate, or investigate.
I mean, you can do the two at the same time, but it gets very hard. I mean, take, for instance, the week that Michael Cohen testified. Congress passed major legislation that week. I forget whether it was the gun control bill or the election reform bill, but the fact is that the Cohen hearing sucked up all the oxygen, and that's all that people paid attention to. I think Democrats are going to have to be very, very careful about this because, you know, we're all tired of this investigation. It's been a strain, obviously, on the president, as Dana points out, especially on people who've had to hire lawyers. And I know what a lawyer's hourly fee is here in D.C., substantial. And you know, but I think the country at large has been is suffering Mueller fatigue, investigation fatigue. If the bottom line, and again, this is just but if the bottom line is that the president has basically been cleared of the major charges, obstruction of justice and collusion, I'm not sure there's going to be much patience to see a lot more high-profile hearings. I think Democrats are going to pursue it at least for a while. It certainly energizes their base. There's still going to be a large percentage of the country that, regardless of what is shown here, is going to very much oppose the president and want to see him brought down, whether in an election or an impeachment. But I do think that there is a danger for Democrats if they continue to pursue this too long, that it sucks up the oxygen. And even if they are legislating, that people won't be paying attention to that. They'll think these are just the House Democrats, and that's the chamber, because they control that chamber, that they're just duty-bound and doing everything they can to carve up the duly elected president of the United States. I think that'll be very tricky for them as to how far they go on that.
Dana, I mean, it's worth pointing out that you had John Brennan, the former CIA director, on another channel, predicting just recently that when the Mueller report comes down, that there will be multiple indictments of people very familiar, significant names, quite familiar to the average Americans, going to the top, predicting that this would all wrap up in a Russia conspiracy, collusion, and indictments from this report. And that, even though we don't know the report, we can confirm is not true.
Well, although, so he might have egg on his face, right? And then, of course, partisans would say it's not the first time. However, you know, there is a possibility of sealed indictments. That might mean that there's no more indictments coming, but there were sealed indictments. Perhaps those are not going to go anywhere. We just truly
tangential to
don't know
Russia.
Yet. Well, but if they're sealed, do we know that, Brett?
No, we don't. I'm saying they could be. You know, there are no indictments, according to the senior DOJ officials, tied to this report on Special Counsel Mueller's Russia investigation. Right,
and maybe those sealed indictments will maybe we will never know. The other thing, I think this report could take some time for them to parse out. I do think that the Attorney General will make good on his claim that this weekend he'll be able to release something to the people, and there is pent-up demand for it, and I think he'll be able to do that. But as you know, Brett, it's just not going to be. It's not going to satisfy. I was just looking through the 2020 Democratic candidates, all demanding that this report be released. They want it in full. One of the things I'd have to ask them, though, is, let's say the president is totally exonerated. Let's say that Mueller finds that, yes, Russia was trying to interfere in our election, but the Trump campaign wasn't doing anything. Like, wouldn't that actually be good news for the country? Like, setting aside the politics, they're not going to necessarily win on this issue anyway politically, but wouldn't that be a great thing if Robert Mueller finishes this thorough investigation and we find out that there was no problem, there was no collusion? I would think that most people would say, good, okay, so now how do we get about the business of preventing Russia from interfering in the future?
Juan, final word here. It's just interesting noting the timing here. We're on Friday afternoon. Usually Friday late afternoon, right before special report, is a time when bad news is dumped by administrations left and right heading into the weekend. This Friday is even more so under the radar because you got the NCAA tournament playing on other channels as teams are fighting it out in their brackets. What about the timing of this as we head into the weekend? And is there any thought behind that?
Well, I don't think that Robert Mueller is paying too much attention to that. I think the pressure here, the political pressure, is so intense, Brett, that for the people who were at the epicenter of this, I think that the effort was to get it done as quickly as possible, that they did not want this to drag on. I mean, you go back to the Clinton-Lewinsky affair, go back to Whitewater, go back to Watergate, and these things all took much longer than the almost 2-year period that we attached to the Mueller report. But I think for Mueller, the emphasis was to do it quickly and maintain credibility. I can't emphasize. I think everybody that you've talked to here this evening has said that Robert Mueller, to this point, has come out of this with his integrity intact, that people expect that he will have done a thorough job and been fair. And the polls show this, that the American people think that he has been fair. And the fact that he has been silent, that there have not been leaks out of his office, has helped to assert that he has been conducting a fair investigation, not using the media to his advantage, and that he wanted to get done quickly so that people wouldn't tire of it. I think that's what it is. Now, I agree with you about special report. I've seen you have to deal with late Friday night dumps, my friend. But I think this is much more about simply getting us to the point where you could take some of the pressure off the president, good or bad, leave that up to the partisans to decide, and secondly, to say this is what we've been able to find in a limited but fair investigation.
Dana, Chris, Juan, thank you.